Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are plunging into, well, the very beginning of a really significant spiritual text. Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba's Masâlik al-Jinân.
Right. Which translates beautifully as the itineraries of paradise. And for this deep dive, our source isn't the entire book itself. It's actually excerpts from a really fascinating discussion based on a YouTube transcript. And it zooms right in on the start, that first chapter.
Exactly. So our mission today really is to figure out what the author, Cheikh Bamba, is doing right out of the gate. What are his initial intentions? What core themes does he hit immediately? Who's he tipping his hat to influence-wise? And how does he kind of lay the groundwork for the whole spiritual journey the book promises?
Yeah, you should think of this introduction not just as some kind of formality, but as a really powerful invitation. He's pulling you straight into his world, his spiritual and intellectual world, right from those first lines.
And he does start in that classical way, doesn't he? Praise to God, prayers on the prophet. It definitely sets that devotional frame. But it feels like these initial verses, they do more than just that standard opening. They seem to pivot pretty quickly to something very focused, very personal.
They absolutely do. The immediate focus, it's almost radical, is on sincerity, on ikhlas. It just jumps out right away. I mean, by verse 3, he's making this really striking point that God looks first at the hearts, not just, the external actions.
That's such a potent idea, especially when you think about traditions where sometimes the rituals or the outward stuff can overshadow the inner state. So why does he put this invisible thing, the intention, sincerity, why put it so forcefully front and center right from verse 4?
Because, well, from his perspective, this is where everything really begins. And maybe a bit more controversially for some, where it all ends up too. For him, sincerity isn't just like a nice quality to have. It's the essential key, the absolute spiritual prerequisite.
The key to what, though?
The key that unlocks the purification of the heart. And he connects this purified heart directly to the goal of the whole book, Jinân's paradise, which pops up around verse 9. He's basically saying, look, without that genuine, pure intention driving them, your outward actions, even the really good-looking ones, they're spiritually empty, hollow. They just lack that foundation needed to get you to that spiritual destination.
So it's not just about doing the right things. You have to feel them, intend them purely for God.
Precisely. And what's really fascinating, I think, is how he then connects this absolute focus on sincerity straight to his understanding of divine unity, Tawhid.
Okay, how does that link work? Because usually when I hear Tawhid, I immediately think of, theological arguments, proofs for God's oneness, that sort of thing.
And he acknowledges that kind of Tawhid. He definitely refers to it. He even mentions other works where you can go learn that theological side, citing al-Sani in verses 11 to 16. So he's showing, look, I know the tradition, I respect the intellectual stuff.
Right, the systematic, theoretical understanding. Got it.
Yes. But then he makes it super clear that this book, Masâlik al-Jinân, is focused on something else entirely. It's about experiential tawhid, a lived, direct, kind of internal knowledge of divine unity. And crucially, he says this deep lived understanding is achieved through that purified heart he was just talking about.
Okay, so the sincerity, the heart purification, they aren't just about doing actions, right? They're the actual path to experiencing divine unity inside yourself.
Exactly that. He's signaling right up front. This isn't mainly a book of theology lessons. It's a practical guide to a profound internal transformative spiritual experience. The theory is important, sure, it's a prerequisite, but the real goal here is the lived reality.
That's a powerful shift in focus, isn't it?
Yeah.
And alongside that clarity, that almost radical focus on the inside, there's also this striking humility.
Yeah.
And this deep respect for tradition. He seems to very deliberately place himself within a whole lineage of great spiritual masters.
He really does, and it's not just a passing comment. In verses 18 through 24, he specifically cites big names like al-Ghazali and Ibn Ata'illah. And just mentioning al-Ghazali's huge work, the Iqya, that's a major statement in itself, right? It puts him squarely in a major stream of Islamic spirituality.
And then he goes even further, describing his own work not just as inspired by, but as a versification of another master's work, al-Yadali from Mauritania. He even gives the title Khatimat Tasawwuf.
Yes, and this is where it gets really, really interesting strategically. It works on a few levels. On one level, it's absolutely genuine humility. Hey, I'm just putting this great master's wisdom into poetry, but it's also incredibly clever. By saying he's building on giants like al-Ghazali and just versifying al-Yadali, he's doing two things at once. He's showing he knows the tradition inside out, And he's legitimizing his own contribution as a solid continuation, not some radical break.
Right, it anchors his work. And presenting it as poetry, as versification, does that also play a part, do you think?
Oh, very likely. Poetry can make really profound, sometimes dense spiritual ideas much more accessible, more memorable, right? More resonant emotionally. It's maybe a way to transmit these deep teachings in a form that kind of bypasses just the intellect and speaks more directly to the heart, which of course fits perfectly with his whole emphasis on the heart we just talked about.
So he's humble and smart about it, rooted in tradition, but still pushing his own focus on that internal path. It's a really interesting balancing act. And he seems, well, surprisingly direct in tackling potential criticisms right here in the introduction, too.
He really does. You see it in verses 46 to 54. He touches on prejudices he might face. He mentions his origin using that word Sudan, which could mean color or region, and also the simple fact that he's writing now in his specific time.
Wow. Addressing origin and timing like that feels incredibly relevant, even today. So what's his response? How does he handle that?
It's just remarkably direct and powerful. He basically cuts through all that external judgment by going straight to a core Quranic teaching from verse 48. He says the only true measure of value in God's eyes is piety, taqwa, consciousness of God, full stop.
So basically, where you're from, what you look like, what century you live in,
Yeah.
it's all irrelevant to your spiritual worth.
Exactly. He's asserting this profoundly universal principle. Spiritual merit has nothing to do with those external accidents of birth or history. It's a really strong affirmation of equality in the spiritual quest, challenging any kind of narrow, prejudiced thinking.
Okay, so if we bring all these threads together, the focus on the heart, the experiential tawhid, grounding it in tradition, tackling bias, how do these connect back to what he actually says he wants to achieve with the book?
Well, he makes his aims pretty clear. One goal is simply to offer sincere advice, nasiha, just good counsel. He also says he wants to revive essential spiritual knowledge, stuff he maybe felt was getting a bit overlooked or forgotten in his day. But the ultimate goal, and he states this without any ambiguity, is just seeking divine pleasure, God's pleasure. Everything in the book is pointed towards that one single aim.
There's one more thing in this intro that felt really personal, quite touching, actually.
You mean his request for prayers?
Yeah.
It shows up early, verse 34, and then again much later, like around verse 701. He specifically asks anyone who reads the book, or copies it, or even just borrows it, to pray for him.
Asking for prayers from readers, potentially centuries later.
Yeah.
That just creates such an immediate personal link, doesn't it?
It really does. It feels like a conscious effort to build a spiritual connection, a relationship with everyone who engages with his work right across time and space. It makes the text feel less like some dusty old artifact and more like, well, a living invitation from a real person reaching out to you.
And before he gets into the main body of the work, he gives us a kind of roadmap for the journey ahead.
Yeah. He outlines the structure right after this intro we've been discussing. He says the book's got the introduction, then 3 main doors or sections. First, understanding the crucial distinction between the creator and the creature. Second, exploring the vices of the soul, the things that hold you back. And third, cultivating virtues and good conduct. So it's a really logical flow. Understand reality, clean house internally, then build up the good stuff.
Wow. So this introduction is way more than just, hello, welcome to my book. It's a comprehensive laying of the entire foundation.
Absolutely. It hammers home those core principles. The absolute primacy of the heart, the intention. It firmly roots the work in respected tradition, but at the same time asserts his own unique voice. His focus on that experiential knowledge, it tackles potential issues head-on with the universal message of spiritual equality. And yeah, it sets out the book's big aims and clear structure.
It sounds like a demanding invitation, definitely, but also one that feels remarkably open to anyone willing to take that inner journey seriously.
That's exactly it. An invitation to deep personal transformation, starting right there with the state of your own heart and aiming for that lived experience of divine unity.
So as we wrap up this look at just the powerful opening of Masâlik al-Jinân, maybe consider that really personal request the author makes. For your prayers, centuries after he wrote it, how does that direct address, that reaching out across time like that, change how you might read a historical spiritual text? Does it make you feel like he's speaking somehow directly to you today? And what does that do for your own engagement, your own journey with this kind of wisdom? Something to think about.